What's going on, y'all? Just Haley here, and I am back again with another video. Today's video we're going to be focusing on Citrine, who got a new augment in Isleweaver that was a little bit of fun to play around with, and honestly I really enjoyed kind of how it worked at first, but we'll get into some of those spicier ideas in just a bit. In the meantime, I do just want to say this build is an update to my Citrine build video that I've done previously. If you guys are running that, it still works, but this one, in my opinion, is a little bit more streamlined and a little bit better with some new things taken into account and some new gameplay changes taken into account as well. I didn't change too much. I added some Omni just for some flexibility, but realistically, she's still an incredible frame and she always has been. Citrine is a fantastic Warframe that can do some really silly things when you start working with synergies that exist in the game. Without further ado, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. If you like the content, remember to like, comment, subscribe. It helps me out a ton, but we will get right into the video. So let's first talk about Subsumes, because there's a couple that I really like on Citrine, and I think they synergize really well with her kit. The first one is probably the one you've seen the most often. It's going to be Roar. Roar is going to be a faction type damage buff to both herself and her pet. That's fantastic because she has so much status. It's going to be a great way to increase her status damage, double dipping into that and making it very, very strong. Roar is a no-brainer buff for Citrine and it's fantastic. I personally throw it on over the 4 because without the augment recrystallize, the 4 feels pretty lackluster to me. So if I'm not going to run that augment, then I'm not going to run the ability personally. This also lets me keep my 1 so that I can generate my own orbs, my own energy, stuff like that. It's really nice, but that is up to you what you want to subsume off. The other thing you could do if you wanted to is go Nourish. Makes the energy feel even nicer on the build. It's also going to give a nice damage buff to the pet, so will Roar. That will make your pets do even more damage because you're going to be applying more viral, which is going to give that damage multiplier for anything armored or health. And that's really strong too. Now the overall effect of this is that you want to be able to give your pets buffs, but keep in mind, if they go down, they will lose that Roar buff and you cannot recast it until it has run off or you jump off the map. I don't recommend jumping off the map all the time, so instead of that, you could just use Nourish to upkeep the buff a little bit more often if you find your pets are a little bit squishy. One of the things with the Prismatic Companion augment is that your pets, your flesh pets, tend to go down more often because they're a little bit harder to upkeep the health on without things like Primed Pack Leader. Now, Primed Pack Leader is a great way to upkeep that health, that overguard, and keep your pets alive if there's enemies to melee. But if your pet is meant to be doing these crazy damage cascades, that can be pretty difficult. One of the issues I had with this augment is that overall, flesh pets are a little bit too squishy. Those independent pets tend to do really silly things, walking into nullifiers, which will clear the gem, by the way, and then just getting nuked because they walk to an enemy they shouldn't be at, and they just go down. They also take a little bit longer to come back than a Sentinel, which is also kind of frustrating. What this means to me is that it is better, in my opinion, to not run the augment and instead just run a Sentinel. Citrine is an incredibly strong frame, even without this augment. The main thing the augment gives is the ability to move around, and if you really want to do some crazy damage cascades, it's just easier to do with a Sentinel. Why? Well, because Sentinels have beam weapons. Beam weapons stack up tons of statuses and they benefit so much from Citrine's Prismatic Gem. The other reason is because Prismatic Gem has up to a 40-meter radius if you stack up range, and that is really, really strong. It's so underrated how much range scales on Citrine, and it's going to make her do just insane things. You can see that even just without Roar, without any extra buffs, without anything extra, the Sentinel still does just insane things, and you're going to see that through over and over and over again. This isn't just a simulacrum build. This is a build that functions really, really well through even the highest end content in the game, and it's very, very strong. Sentinels also benefit from something like Prime Regen, which is going to give you a 35-second reduction in respawn timers. So if the pet ever does go down, they are so much faster to come back. And oftentimes, because of how the damage cascades work, you'll even see that the Sentinel will trigger a cascade that will actually revive themselves, and you'll just be able to keep it going. Now, in the end, a lot of this comes down to your build and stuff like that. There's nice ways to build your flesh pets if you're doing shorter missions, but if you are going into longer missions, the overall effect of the augment just isn't going to be there. So I do just want to preface all of this with that. If you like the extra duration, I understand, I do get that, and that is pretty cool. So that could be a reason enough to run it if you're looking to do that. But because of the effectiveness of Sentinels, I just can't justify running it on my typical Citrine build. For that reason, the typical Citrine build for me looks like this. Now for this build, we are going to be running Summoner's Wrath in our aura. This is mandatory. It's going to give us a roar-like buff onto our pet. It is exceptionally strong, and it works really, really well for this build. We're also going to be going with 2 Archon mods, Archon Continuity, so we can prime Corrosive with our Toxin, plus we love Duration. It's going to feel really good. Archon Stretch is just going to be a little bit of extra energy sustain, but it's going with our Overextended and Augur Reach to give us up to 265% range. This is going to feel really good for a stationary gem that we're using, because that's going to give us 40-meter radius, meaning about 80 meter diameter on the gem. This means it is so easy to cover an entire room, and on almost every mission type, that's all you're going to need. The only time that this isn't going to be true is things like Exterminate and maybe Captures, but if you're looking for builds to do Exterminates and Captures, I don't know why you're doing Citrine. That's a whole you issue, whatever. We do run Prime Flow because I do like the extra energy, it just feels really comfortable, but if you wanted to drop this and replace it with Shards, you certainly could. The typical replacement being Transient Fortitude, though, is going to drop your duration, and that doesn't feel great because of Preserving Shell, so I liked Prime Flow here. Personal preference, though. Adaptation, again, a little bit personal preference here, but I really like the combination of Adaptation with Preserving Shell. Most of the time, that's going to mean that Impact, Puncture, Slash, whatever the predominant type of IPS element from the faction you're fighting is almost always going to be at 99% reduced, meaning most of the fodder enemies become completely irrelevant, and that's going to help proc your Aegis, because they are going to do so much less damage to your shields. It's going to be really easy to upkeep your Aegis and keep that procking, keep that going, which is going to create your survivability just being completely brainless. You don't have to think about it, you don't have to do anything with that. Now, if you don't like Aegis, if you don't have Aegis, right now is the perfect time to farm it in Isleweaver. It goes very quick. However, you could instead replace this with Impetus, give you a little bit more energy sustain if you want, and that would be okay. You're also going to get some power strength from that. You should be running somewhere between 7 to 8, depending on your pet statuses at a time, and that's okay. If you don't like that, you could also go for something like Efficiency, just to give you some extra duration. Duration is going to feel really good on both your Gem, your Roar, and your Preserving Shell, so all of those are going to feel fantastic. Nourish if you're running Nourish too. Those are the main options that I would say. Prime Sure-Footed also can be swapped out if you want to. You could instead run something like Cunning Drift for more range, but you don't really need it. It's just optional. Now, I know some people probably came here to see what they would run for the Prismatic Companion Augment, and while I do understand that, it's not how I like to run her. I will give you the sub here, and that's going to be you take out Overextended from that build, you throw in the Augment, and you're good to go. Everything else will stay the same. Now, the reason we can sacrifice so much range is because we will still have 175% range between Stretch and Augur Reach. We'll still keep that Augur mod so we can get some shields back whenever we cast R1, or Preserving Shell, or recast the Gem, anything like that. We're going to be getting shields back. That's going to help fund our Aegis. And the other thing with this is that when the pet has the Gem, they're going to be staying relatively close to you. You don't really need that much extra range. Between about 170 to 190 seems to be the sweet spot in my opinion. After you go below about 170, you can start to run out of the range of the pet with the Gem, so that's an option too. But if you wanted to swap off the Overextended for the Prismatic Companion, you certainly could, and that would be an option. While I do think it is a little bit weaker, if you like to run independent pets, that's okay. I'm going to give you builds for both my Sentinel, as well as what I would run for a Predacyte build, as well as what I would run for a MOA build, because MOAs also work with the Prismatic Companion Augment, and they get to use beam weapons. The main difference is that they lose one of the mods that our Sentinels get called Fired Up. Fired Up is an incredibly good damage buff that also helps weight our Verglas that we're going to be using for more heat. Heat is one of the best statuses to spread because it's going to stack infinitely as you continue to stack it. It's just going to do more and more damage, which is really, really cool the way that it works. What that's going to do is it's going to empower those cascades that you're seeing as the taxon with the Verglas that I'm using right now just continues to spread those statuses and make them go absolutely crazy throughout a mission. It's very easy in a typical survival as well. You're not ever really going to be out of range of your gem. If you are, recasting it isn't a big deal. Essentially, effectively, if you are not moving into a new room at least once every 40-ish seconds, you do not need to recast your gem. Therefore, it is not worth it to run the Prismatic Companion Augment. If you tend to be a little bit ADHD, a little bit antsy, and you like to move a lot, Prismatic Companion gains more value, and you have to find a way to make your companion work with that. So I'm going to hopefully help you with that here. Before we do though, Shards, very optional here. There's a lot of flexibility built into Citrine's kit, but I like 3 strength shards just to help make up for that overextended. Then I do 1 cast speed and 1 equilibrium just to engage an equilibrium effect. Since she is going to be creating her own health and energy orbs, that feels really nice. If you don't like that, that's fine too. You could drop some of the strength here, go duration, that's fine. You could also drop one of the strength shards for cast speed, something like I used to run. You could even potentially drop your flow and go for 2 energy max shards. Those are gonna be cool too with the blues. There's a lot of options here. Really pick what your favorite is. This was my favorite setup because it countered the overall effect of overextended, while still giving me some cast speed because otherwise the gem felt a little slow, and still giving me that equilibrium effect that I value so much on a frame that can create their own orbs like Citrine. Okay, so for this build we are going to be using the most general of general Sentinel builds that I possibly can use, and that is going to be shown on my Nautilus. Now the reason that I'm showing you this on the Nautilus is actually because Nautilus is a really great contender for Reinforced Bond, and you can switch this up because Citrine doesn't need Synth Deconstruct. So there's a couple extra optional mods here that I'll talk about, but for general of the most general builds for Sentinels, this is what I run. Assault Mode, Momentous, Contagious, and Fired Up, absolutely mandatory to get our cascades going and make that work. Vacuum, also kind of a mandatory mod because this is a looter shooter, and if you're not looting, then you're just shooting. That's a lot more boring, I suppose. But obviously if you want to drop it, you certainly could. Comfort mods that I view as really, really strong, but not mandatory for this setup: Guardian and Manifold. Guardian Manifold is going to allow you to continually reproc your shields back to full whenever they go out, and since you are spreading so many statuses and getting so many quick kills with it, Guardian's cooldown isn't going to be an issue. You're just constantly going to have shields back, and it's going to feel really, really comfortable, really safe all the time. Feels really good. We then run Prime Regen, Synth Deconstruct, and Animal Instinct. Choose 2 of these and swap them out for Calculated Redirection and Reinforced Bond, and you'll be able to do the setup for the Worm Prime or a Nautilus Prime. That'll give you Reinforced Bonds, extra fire rate, as well as another way to keep them alive by generating tons of shields and overshields for them by reloading. I didn't do that in the gameplay that you see here, but it is still a very strong effect if you want to do it and just make a couple changes. Personally, not something I like to do too often, but it is a very specific build for certain frames that are already generating health orbs and stuff like that, or if you don't value the extra loot radar, enemy radar of Animal Instinct. That's up to you. I don't want to make that decision for you. From there, we also then have our Verglas. Now the Verglas build is going to be the basic setup that I have. I don't use a Riven or anything like that on it because I don't have one. If I did, I'd probably be trying to get something like crit chance, maybe some base damage, maybe an elemental combo, stuff like that. But what I run on my Verglas is this, and this is what I've been running on my Taxon Verglas for the longest time, and I really like it. Works really well for me, but obviously if you wanted to slot in a faction mod, you could do even more roar type damage with extra multiplicative damage on a faction mod. Slot that in either over the magnetic capacity or over serration. It's up to you. I just tend to really like the extra magnetic damage for those Xmas because it chews through Overguard really easily and replaces that Overguard with the extra lightning proc whenever it breaks. It's really good, really strong, and it works really well, but like I said, it's up to you. The extra status damage feels really good. That's another status damage. It's going to be a multiplicative status damage boost. It's really cool. Viral acceleration for more fire rate, malignant force, and primed cryo rounds gives us viral. If you want to drop the primed cryo rounds down for a little bit less viral weighting, you could, but we are mostly making up for that with that fired up that we are running, so that is up to you. If you're running Nourish, you might even want to consider swapping out the extra viral that we have here and then going for more crit chance, crit damage, stuff like that, because that is going to help add more damage into this, and that might be even more important if you're looking at something like the MOA setup that I do like to run sometimes and works really well with the Prismatic Companion mod. Now, a lot of people discount MOAs, but MOAs have a lot of flexibility that Sentinels just don't. The main thing that you're missing here is that fired up extra damage. But if you make a couple of those changes to the Verglas that I mentioned and, run something like a Nourish over that roar, you can actually make up for it and do some really cool stuff. Now, I am running Guardian still, Manifold still, but we do get to run now Stasis Field. Stasis Field is going to reduce projectile damage by 60% to anything inside of it. It's very strong, especially because, again, they're not getting that preserving shell, so that's going to feel pretty cool. We then also get to run that reinforced bond with calculated redirection that I was talking about, which is again very strong, and then shockwave actuators to make sure that we're able to spread even more statuses. But again, you could swap that off for something like the Prime Pact Leader or something like that if you want extra survivability on this Sentinel type build. For the MOA, you are going to be able to carry around your gem with the MOA since it is an independent option. You could even go DUPLEX, though I strongly recommend against DUPLEX if you're running Contagious Bond, because keep in mind, DUPLEX clones do not benefit from Contagious Bond. If they get the last hit on an enemy, it will not proc a cascade. It will not do anything except kill that enemy. You'll get an energy orb, potentially because of DUPLEX, what it does, but do not run DUPLEX if you are running Murderous, Sentinel, MOA, or Flesh Pet builds. Just don't do it. DUPLEX is a bad synergy for that. Again, Primed Animal Instinct is super convenient, super nice. I like it. And then Vacuum, because of course Vacuum. If me glazing Sentinels wasn't enough to scare you away from Flesh Pets, here's what I run from my Pharoah Predacyte for a Citrine build. Anabolic Pollination is a ton of extra toxin damage, it's huge. We also then run Momentous Bond, we go Prime Pack Leader for our survivability, but if you wanted to again use something like Reinforced Bond to crush on that, you could drop the Prime Pack Leader. I just think it's worth running. Tandem Bond is going to give you even more damage. Mecha Recharge is going to help those shields recharge, as well as give you a little bit of a Mecha Set, though it's not worth running on her at all. And then Calculated Redirection so that we could hit that extra 1200 shields to proc the Reinforced Bond without needing overshields. That's really cool. Primed Animal Instinct for the extra loot radar. Again, I really value it. Contagious Bond, of course. And then we do like our fetch because loot does feel pretty nice. This will be a pretty tanky option, and it's going to give you all of that extra toxin from Anabolic Pollination, which is going to feel really nice, especially when it starts spreading around. This one, to me, will create some of the best value from a flesh pet, and it really is, in my opinion, the only flesh pet I would consider running when it comes to Prismatic Companion, because you are getting other value out of it from Anabolic Pollination, from the Mecha Set that you get to run 2 pieces of and still get some decent okay type value with it, from Tandem Bond, and it's one of the tankier pet options in my opinion. You also get the value from Reinforced Bond here, which is going to feel really good too. So if you're looking to run a flesh pet, that's what I would run, and here's what I would run on the claws. For these, I have a slightly different setup for the screenshot than normal because there is one swap that you can make if you want to carry around a Paris with you when you do this, and you could swap off Magnetic Claws for the Hunter Synergy. That's going to give you extra crit chance that'll take it over with the Incarnate, over 100% crit chance, which is going to feel really nice because you'll get those guaranteed crits, you'll get a ton of extra status as well, and that's really strong. The rest of this is kind of fixed. I like Magnetic Claws because the status duration feels really good, but if you're not looking to run a specific primary with your setup, Magnetic Claws fits a lot better than Hunter Synergy. Hunter Synergy is just if you're going for those really high crit chance weapons that also have really high status chance, then you could do the Hunter Synergy with Mecha Overdrive in there as well. That's up to you. It's a little too much micromanaging for me, especially with things like Circuit and stuff like that, where I can't guarantee that I'm going to get the right setup for weapons, but that's up to you. I'm not going to yuck your yum if you want to do it. Throughout a lot of this gameplay, I'm sure you guys have seen that I've been using a gun that looks a little bit interesting, a little bit different, a little bit unique, and that is the Riot. The Riot's a lot of fun. I actually modified my build from what's in here, and I settled on a new build for it, but it is really strong. I'll flash that build for you here. If you want to screenshot it, you absolutely can, but this thing shreds, especially on frames with good status chance boost, like Citrine, or forced status proc. For the Riven, if you don't have this, just run the Magnetic Might mod for extra crit damage, and it'll work fine. And it's a very, very strong effect. You're going to get more crit damage, you're going to get some Magnetic. If you have a Riven for it, my Riven currently is just a basic multi-shot and fire rate. It's essentially just a slightly smaller version of Lethal Torrent, but the multi-shot feels so good that I liked running it. If you don't want to do that, like I said, Magnetic Might works fine in that slot, and it's going to give you very similar results, but this is what I'm running right now. And the pokey melee stick that I've been using is the dual Visciss, which I'm currently running this build on. If you don't like the Prime Reach, don't run it, run something else. You could also put a faction mod instead of Prime Reach because you are using melee influence on a build like this, especially because you're on Citrine with all the status chance. Feels really good. I know a lot of people have glazed up the Blast Gas Electric. I just didn't like it because it didn't proc the unique trait as much, but that's up to you. If you want to run the Blast, you absolutely could as well. You'd probably just go for a Riven. It's going to give you a little bit more of the elemental status effects so that you can have that. I do have a Riven for it, but I didn't like it with a Riven, it just wasn't enough value, so I don't run it right now with a Riven. Dual Visciss is really strong, and it works really, really well as a melee influence weapon, so you can see that in here, especially when you combine it with someone like Citrine, who's giving it even more status chance, and all the extra cascades and stuff like that. But I really was trying to mess around with the Riot here more than anything. I kind of devolved to my old classic playstyle of poke things really hard until they die. Overall, Citrine is a really strong frame, and this new augment for her, Prismatic Companion, can be okay. It's not bad, it's not great, it's just some quality of life that if you didn't like setting up a cage for yourself with the gem before, you can use her now and not feel like you're doing that. There's options to run it that work really well. Like I said, if you want to drop the overextended, it's still going to feel great with something like that Predacyte build that I showed, and it can be a fantastic option for her. However, we have to keep in mind that Sentinels exist, and they're really, really strong with all the buffs that we can give them. The basic Sentinel build, even the Taxon Baby's First Sentinel that I have here, absolutely shreds through enemies without any effort at all, even in higher end missions, even in a mission like MOT where they have that 200% damage bonus that they get just from being in MOT, you're still going to see them just shredding even at higher end where their armor and their health start to scale up, because the ability to stack up those statuses is still there and it's still strong. Keeping your Preserving Shell up is going to also be able to proc things like the Aegis very, very easily. You can keep your gem up to get that status chance added into the Verglas as well, and it's really strong. If you want to run something like the Prismatic Companion, I do understand. It's a fun little option, it's a fun little idea, but make sure you're running it in the right way, and make sure you understand that it's not the Prismatic Companion augment that's doing all of the work. It's just a good build on your pet and a decent build on your Citrine. So please keep that in mind, because that is something that I know a lot of people have had a little bit misconception with, a little bit misconstrued. Citrine's always been able to do these things. It's just she used to set up what I call a baby cage. That little thing that you see every time that she is jumping around, the little rainbow effect, that's your baby cage. Whenever you set that up, you don't want to leave that zone, and honestly, in most missions, I tend not to. So for me, I don't need the augment because that quality of life doesn't really help me at all for how I play Citrine. Some people find that a lot more offensive and a lot more annoying than I do, because they are moving more between rooms, they are moving around more, maybe they are doing more capture missions or exterminates and they want to bring Citrine with them to those. In that case, Prismatic Companion can work really well, but you're also not going to be as, working towards those damage cascades, because you're just not going to see them as much when enemy density is lower in those lower and lower tier type missions. And I did want to throw this clip in here just to show you guys how big the range is with the build that I run on Citrine. It's really large. 39.5 meter radius means you are effectively at an 80 meter diameter on your circle. This means that most rooms are going to be absolutely encompassed by the gem just by themselves, and that's really strong. You don't really need much more than that. You don't really need to recast that when you're already taking up the entire room just by itself. Keep in mind that with all of this range, you can also use her 1, which you will want to be doing a lot. Now the reason for that is a pro tip for Citrine. Whenever you hit enemies with her 1, you're going to be spreading the beams into 3 beams instead of just 1. From basic weapon damage alone, the gem will only ever target 1 enemy at a time. Now, if that enemy is, behind other enemies, the beam will go through enemies. It'll go through walls, it'll go through everything to hit that enemy. But with the 1, it'll target up to 3 enemies. That's really nice. It's going to spread more statuses, and it's going to also create a bunch of energy to make her energy economy feel disgustingly strong. All of that is important because if you are subsuming things, make sure you keep that 1 untouched, because you are going to want it. Preserving Shell is a lot of her damage reduction, so you probably want that too. And then her 3 is obviously her gem, so really we do get stuck on that 4 to subsume off, and that's okay. The other thing to talk about as we wrap up here is our Mecha Set. Why I'm not running it. I know a lot of people are talking it up and glazing it, but it just doesn't really work for what you'd want it here for. Unless you're running the full set, it's not as worth it unless you're getting other factors out of it, other benefits, like our Predacyte is. In Citrine's case, you'd be losing Summoner's Wrath. That's a lot of multiplicative damage to lose. And you'd also be losing a mod slot in favor of some extra armor occasionally, if you get the kill. If a teammate gets the kill, they get the armor instead, and that feels really bad. Don't count on that armor ever if you are running the Mecha Set mods, but it's just not as good as a lot of people seem to think it is. It's only really good when the overall effect of the mods is benefited on by everything in the kit for both the Companion, Predacyte, and the frame. Other than that, make your choice on whether or not you want to run the mecha set. I just don't think it's very valuable. And that does kind of just wrap everything up for us here. If you have any questions about the build, things that you changed or whatever, leave them in the comments below. Remember to like, subscribe, it helps me out a ton. As always, I've been Just Haley, you've been just amazing. And until next time, do remember that I love your faces. Bye.